My name is Mlu, and this is Devotionables for busy people, and our text comes from Ruth chapter 2. My assigned text begins in verse 4, but we'll begin verse 1 and end at verse 18. And so we read. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem. And he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, "Whose young woman is this?" And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers." So she came, and she has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go and glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Have I not charged the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn." Then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother in your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Then she said, "I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants." We met Ruth, and she happens to find herself in the field of Boaz, a close relative of Naomi's husband. And the big takeaway from this passage is the providence of God in what seems to be mere coincidence, because as we were reading, it turns out it is God who even inclines Boaz's heart toward this stranger. God is working out all of these events, the way that Ruth comes into the field that belongs to Boaz, and the way that Boaz takes notice of this stranger. And look at, this is an example of dependence on God and trusting Him to provide. And how so? Notice when Boaz comes into the field, the way that he addresses his servants. "The Lord be with you." And they in turn say, "The Lord bless you." Meaning, the Lord is with them in the way that He blesses their master. And just trivia for the day here. It is said that one of the words that we use to greet or say goodbye in particular, has similar origins, meaning God be with you. And so we can just up the stakes a little bit in the way that we live each other and say, "God be with you, the Lord bless you." And just a question as we continue, how different our thoughts and attitudes would be towards one another. Old and young, land or unland, etc., if we made it a point to acknowledge each other in blessing and genuine concern for each other. And I think this is what Paul means in writing to the Ephesians when he says, "Greet each other and address one another with psalms, in blessing, with the blessing of God, with the attitude that looks to God for everything." Boaz has regard for both his familiar servants and Ruth the stranger. There is no not discrepancy in the way that he treats either of them. And if we've been paying attention to the way we read the Bible, he is carrying out the instruction of the law given in Leviticus and Deuteronomy way before. And he does it beyond the requirement. And in this way, he shows a wealth of generosity. Well, isn't this the wonder that this is happening in a time when there is no king in Israel and everybody is doing whatever is right in their own eyes? And here is a man who is not envious, or neither is he covetous, so that he is able to give out of the abundance that God has given. And how does he do so? Boaz recognizes Ruth's deeds in caring for her mother-in-law and prays a blessing over her. And we can be sure that the way that he prays, which might model for us the way in which we can pray, he's not afraid to be the answer to his prayer for her. And again, we find something of this sort in Paul's instruction, especially in terms of the tangible blessings that God has given to his people. He writes to Timothy in 1 Timothy 5:17-19, "As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be high-minded, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life." But just a caveat, as we draw to a conclusion, this is not a quid pro quo deal that you do this thing for another person and then God does something, but simply that when we grasp the greatness of God's goodness to us, we are all the more eager to extend it to others. Which, on the other hand, then means that envy and covetousness, they always make abundance, and God's goodness looks insufficient, so that we end up becoming stingy. So check this out and weigh it out in your life and see. We must esteem ourselves not so highly, overly important, like Ruth, who, having found such favor and recognition that she did not deserve according to any standard, she bows down and says, "How is it possible?" We also have to come to understand the gracious providence of God, that once we were just strangers, cut off from God's covenant, from God's presence, but now we have one like Boaz who has let us find favor in him, and we have come to trust and find refuge under his wings. I was greatly helped by a hymn called "Jesus, Love of My Soul," and verse 2 in particular, which says, "Other refuge have I none. Hangs my helpless soul on thee. Leave me not alone. Still support and comfort me. All my trust on thee is stayed. All my help from thee I bring. Cover my defenseless head with the shadow of thy wing." And so Boaz, though he's not Jesus, prefigures him in his words and his actions, and delight in the law of the Lord, and so that we can get a picture of what it looks like to be Christ-like, even while we're reading the Old Testament. And so as a Christian, wouldn't you show this week a little of what Jesus is like in your words in kindness and in grace, and in extending God's blessing to you, to others around you? The Lord bless you, and the Lord be with you.